You washed pots as a teenager in rural Monaghan and ended up cooking a whole camel in the Saudi desert. At what point did a working class kid from Ireland genuinely believe he could build something of his own?
So in 1994, I spent the summer scrubbing pots in the Hillgrove Hotel in Monaghan because I wanted to see inside a kitchen. I wanted to see inside a professional kitchen. As a kid, I was probably an odd kid, but I've always wanted to be a cook. I've always wanted to be around food. And I suppose it comes from my mother being a great cook, my grandmother, great baker and good cook. My grandfather grew his own vegetables, so it gave me a love of produce. We used to go fishing and I wasn't allowed to, cook the fish in my grandmother's kitchen, but they had an outhouse with a cooker or a range in it. So I was allowed to cook out there standing on top of a box. I was always drawn to the kitchen. Going back to your question, I never believed I could do any of that. It wasn't a goal. I just worked hard and just continued to work hard and followed my nose, really. And my nose led me to Holland, London, Sydney. And when you go to these places, you meet people. And I threw myself into the deep end. Yeah, I didn't speak Dutch when I worked in a Michelin-starred kitchen in Holland. I didn't know what they were talking about. But I still got up every morning and went in and tried my best. Did I always succeed? No, but I didn't give up. And when I went to London, I was very young, I was 20 years of age. And I was working in a kitchen full of men, and I was a little boy. But I believed I could get up in the morning. I believed I could hold a knife. I believed I could cook, and I would look at what everybody around me is doing. I thought, well, I can do what they're doing. Give me the opportunity. I'll try my best. Didn't always succeed. You never do. But I tried and I tried and I tried. And when I thought, well, I'm as good as that guy, and that's how my career progressed. I just always threw myself into the deep end. The fact that I ended up working for a Saudi sheikh and in a palace near the Jordan border, and there was a camel getting cooked in a capsa. Well, that was a strange scenario. It's a long story. I probably won't get into it here. But, going back to that boy who was washing pots at 14, I never even dreamt of that experience. I never knew it existed.
Cooking for billionaires and super yachts sounds extraordinary, but you've said that you went back to chef de partie level afterwards to prove yourself. That is a rare act of humility in this industry. What did it cost you and what did it give you?
I was very young when I took a job on a super yacht. I was 24 years of age. In my mind, I thought I was older than I actually was. And I had lived in many countries to that point, and I had relatively good experience. But 24, you're still a kid. But I jumped into that world and I'd done it like I'd done everything else. I tried my best, and I worked really hard, and that resonated with the people I was working for and around, and I got promoted within that world. So I didn't stop working on the boat, but I joined the entourage and I would travel around the world in private jets and, up to ski chalets and on islands and, all this other crazy stuff. So I got sucked into this world, and 1 year that I told myself I would give myself into this world ended up being 4 years. And over that 4-year period, I had amazing life experiences, but I felt that my cooking wasn't my restaurant cooking, not my cooking. My cooking was, I was exposed to a lot of different cultures. I was exposed to a lot of different produce. I was exposed to, worldly this, that, and the other. But I wasn't in a restaurant. Molecular gastronomy started, within that time, and everybody was using water baths and all these new techniques that I didn't know. So I felt like I was falling behind my peers. So when it came time to leave that industry, and I had been thinking about it for a while, I really wanted to get back, and I wanted to learn again, and I wanted to push myself I really hated the idea of my friends going on and being sous chefs and head chefs, and I was, traveling around the world on a jolly, as they put it. But I wasn't. I was working very hard. So when it came time to leave, I didn't want to go in as a sous chef, which somebody of my age then, would have felt that was a natural place to be. I felt like there was still a lot to learn. And, even in my ripe old age now, I still think there's a lot to learn. I think the day that you stop learning is the day that you stop. There's always something to learn. There's always something new. And especially back then, like I said, with molecular gastronomy, and then it was the start of the Nordic movement after that. So there's a whole different world of cuisine out there within restaurant cooking. And so when I took the job as a chef de partie, I was humble. I wanted to do it. I jumped on the sauce section, and I proved myself. And then I was promoted to sous chef in a very quick succession. I was a little bit older. I did have a lot of experience under my belt at that stage, but I was still hungry. I was very, very hungry, very driven.
So would you say by stepping back, it gave you the opportunity to grow more?
Yeah, 100%. By stepping back, and it's a confidence thing as well. When you haven't worked in a restaurant environment, you don't want to put yourself within them walls and within that team and oversell yourself, because it is a problem, in any industry. If you go in there and you're telling them that you're this, that, and the other, but then you fall short, that's quite a blow to your ego, and it could set you back years. For me, I wanted to prove to myself more than anybody else that I was, good enough to make that step to be a sous chef, even though I'd been a head chef of this luxury yacht for 4 years.
You opened the Gannett in a burnt-out shell with no experience running a restaurant and a landlord who was not sure about you. Most people would have waited until the conditions were perfect. What made you jump anyway?
Opening the restaurant wasn't just me. It was my business partner at the time, Ivan, and we bonded over a shared love of hospitality and food, but also a desire to be our own boss. And I grew up in a household where my father and my mother owned their own business. My uncle owned his own business, and it was kind of in the blood in a way. It didn't seem like a scary step, even though I had absolutely zero experience running a business or leading a team like that. So I think there was a whole lot of arrogance, and there was more than that. It wasn't just arrogance, but there was ignorance in there as well. But you learn on the job. It's like everything else. And it was a jump that I felt at the time I needed to make, and within that, we were lucky. We were in the right place at the right time. Yes, we worked really hard, really, really hard. Like with everything else, you put in the hours, you put in the effort, and it wasn't easy. And it still isn't easy. We're still working really hard. We're still pushing on, as they say, in the kitchens. But, it was something at that time. And now I feel, that I need to do. This is where I belong.
1155 is described as approachable yet ambitious, celebrating Scottish produce while honouring your Irish roots. After 11 years of fine dining, what convinced you that the bistro was a more honest expression of who you are as a cook?
So, throughout your career, you're propelled by what you desire, what you like, what you gravitate towards. And for me, for a lot of my time as a chef, as a cook, I gravitated towards the fine dining. From the 90s, I suppose it was fine dining that propelled me on. It was looking at the Marco Pierre White books, the Gordon Ramsay books, the Nico Landeas books, the Gavroche, and emulating them and holding them up on a pedestal. But the more you get into a certain world and you become a part of that, not that I'm anywhere near these legendary greats, but you get a part of the fine dining world. Like anything, you start to tire of it. My love of food has never tired, has never wavered at all. And my love of hospitality has never. But I just wasn't so impressed with the pomp. I wasn't. I like a refinement. All my plates are very clean. Even as a bistro, that's how I like to look at food. But I love an impact. I love when the flavor kind of slaps you around the face a little bit. Even though it looks quite delicate, it has a punch. And I felt that embracing the more French bistro style, where you're going in for a really tasty but unstuffy meal, I felt like that's what I was gravitating towards. I spent a lot of my time going on holidays to Spain as well. It's wonderful. You go around Pincho bars, and every place you go to specializes in something else. You get a real slap of flavor, whatever it is, that personality. So I wanted to do something like that. But aesthetically, I found French bistro to be more my speed and more what I'm into. And after some long conversations with Kevin, my right arm here at the restaurant, that's what he was gravitating towards as well. So it just felt like a natural evolution.